since the beginning of humanity, on some level, we seek a kind of control that is not available to us. Technology that seems to promise that control to be like just around the corner. And I think that is a big part of the problem. You don't want total control, solo control over your time. You want your time to be synchronized well with other people's time to do anything, right? To be in a relationship, to launch a business, to be a political activist. Like, you need to have coordinated time and do things alongside other people.
That when something doesn't go our way, we get extremely impatient. And I was wondering to what extent you think this issue with regards to time management is related to an issue of control and the feeling of humans wanting to control things.
I think it's totally related to control, and this topic of control in the new book just like that's the point, right? It's like, okay, we I think since the beginning of humanity, on some level, we seek a kind of control that is not available to us. We control over the fact that, in fact, we'd like to do more things. We'd like to not have to die. We'd like to not have to feel emotionally vulnerable in relationships. We'd like to be in more control than we have. But then you add in, among other forces, technology that seems to promise that control to be like just around the corner. And I think that is a big part of the problem today, right? It's like in the even just in the 1980s, frankly, you could dream of being able to send and receive hundreds and hundreds of letters in the course of a day if you wanted to. But like, so what? There was no technology, at least in widespread adoption, that made it feel like that was possible. And then email comes along, and then it feels like you ought to be able to send almost an infinite amount of messages. But of course you can't, because you're a human, or reply to perhaps would be more appropriate thing to talk about. It feels like, in the days when you're just putting food into an oven and leaving it for 2 hours before it's cooked, no one's worried about cooking food instantaneously. But when you can cook it in a microwave in 2 minutes, it gets really frustrating that isn't 0 minutes. And I don't know if in your lives you have contexts where there's like a shared microwave. Lots of people do in the work, in the corporate world and everything, the office microwave. It's all, whenever you go to one of those, it is always stuck at 7 seconds or 6 seconds, which was the point at which the last person just like got so impatient they had to press cancel and get their food early, because there's something about that feeling of like, I'm almost God over time and reality that is much more frustrating than like you're nowhere near being God. So I think I think control is really like, runs through the heart of all this.
Yeah, to a certain extent, I think even if you can get that control, there's something still problematic there, or even if you can get still very close to it. So I'm going to use the example of Mario Salcedo, which you cite in the book. So for our listeners, Mario Salcedo, he was like a successful businessman in one venture or another. I can't remember what it was. And for the last about 25 years or so has been living entirely on cruises. Fully in control of his time, because he runs an investment business or something for about 10 or so hyper rich individuals. And he spends all his time on the yacht, able to do whatever he wants on this huge cruise with diversions and fun things all around him. And yet you don't seem to think that quite strikes at happiness, or that there's something missing there. What does your intuition tell you about what's missing there?
Well, there's a lovely, I was just looking at, there's a short movie, which I think you can find fairly easily online, called The Happiest Guy in the World, about him. And I'm being terribly rude about him in the book, because I've got no grounds to say that he isn't happy. I'm really saying if that were my life, it wouldn't be happy. And I think you can tell from this wonderful short movie that I don't think he is happy. But anyway, whatever. The basic point here is that this is somebody, the purpose he serves in my argument anyway, is that this is somebody who really does get to live life completely on his own terms. He wakes up in the morning and he can do anything he wants with his time. I mean, within the restrictions of being on a cruise ship, but doesn't have to do laundry or cook meals, and it's all taken care of. And there's a real sense I get in the short movie, and I think if I was in that life of it, that this is a big mistake about what gives time its value, that actually that kind of total individual sovereignty over your time is not something that you would ultimately want. So he's always sort of, talking about his friends, but he really means the staff of the cruise line that he's a customer of, who are sort of obliged to, throw him little birthday parties and say and ask him how he's doing. It's like there's something missing there. And I'm using that in the book to really make the point that actually you don't want total control, solo control over your time. You want your time to be synchronized well with other people's time to do anything, right? To be in a relationship, to launch a business, to be a political activist. Like, you need to have coordinated time and do things alongside other people. And yet there's a lot about our society, I think, that is increasingly sort of makes it harder and harder, at least outside of work itself, to get that kind of synchronization. And maybe this is different in a student environment, but certainly in my life, like, it is almost impossible to make a plan with like 2 other friends for us all to meet up. And it isn't because we're all the busiest people in the world. It's just because our time is not synchronized. We have spare time. It's just not the same spare time. And I think that kind of problem, which again, traditional societies that were more organized around, everyone stops for the Sabbath and everyone does this on this day. Lots of disadvantages to that, but some big advantages as well.
Yeah, I hate to bring up my thesis again, but it really does interest me, because I did talk about the way in which humans might be out of sync with a city, for example, or the urban environment around them, and how this lack of synchronization causes internal issues.
Yeah,
I suppose there is some balance that needs to be struck between not neglecting a collective time, yet nonetheless in the 21st century being able to have time for our own pursuits and potential goals. You might have maybe answered this in some other way earlier on, but perhaps to hone in on that, how might we find and strike that balance between collective and personal?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to take it to a sort of real extreme, there's a sort of a society in which everybody has to do everything at the same time. It's a totalitarian society. That's what it means on some level, right? That sort of total command of the lives of the citizens. So I'm not in favor of that, and I suspect there was something a bit totalitarian about certain kinds of older traditional societies where you didn't have any freedom to do things with your time. I think it's as simple, really, as kind of making a few commitments in your life that are sort of difficult to get out of. And that could literally be as mundane as like, joining a choir that meets on the same night every week. Could be as big as, getting married, which again is not completely reversible as a commitment, but it's, pretty big deal to reverse it. So you're sort of, in all these cases, you're giving away something to get something else, right? You're giving away the freedom to not go to the choir practice on a Wednesday night, or to only sing on the days that you feel like singing or something, right? All these kind of so-called freedoms you're giving away because you have to be there at that time for as long as you're involved. And I like that example. I don't know if either of you have this experience, but my experience, I have experience singing choirs as a pretty bad singer. It's the classic example of the thing that is like greater than the sum of its parts. It's an extraordinary kind of transcendent experience to be part of a choir, even if only a handful of its members, not me, are like professional quality singers. But anyway, it could be anything. Join organizations, sign up to things, become a member of a religious organization if that's your thing. It's just commitments, basically, right? It's things where you voluntarily say, actually, I probably do have to be in that place at that time every Wednesday for the foreseeable future, or I actually do have to stop doing what I'm doing when my son wakes up because I decided to become a parent. So I've got things I have to do and that are not under my direct command all the time.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that clip from our interview with Oliver Burkeman. If you'd like to check out the full interview, you can click right here. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and drop a comment with your thoughts down below. Stay tuned and see you next time.